Well, hello, welcome once again to Pale Blends and Beyond. Thank you for joining us today. And if you do like this programming, the artists and the musicians that I speak with and visit with on this channel, please be sure and hit the like button below and also subscribe to the channel. I know some of these musicians have been interviewed in print form and on written interview sites, but I like to do the video interviews because they're more of the moment. And a lot of times, you get those spontaneous answers and interactions with people. So anyway, thank you for joining us again, and let's get going. Bob Spalding is an American musician, composer, arranger, and producer. Since 1980, Bob has been a member of the Ventures, playing on over 40 albums as well as touring and producing with the band. Bob's first band was the Nomads, a high school band when he lived in Austin, Texas. A career in music was put on hold when Bob was drafted into the Army and served a tour of duty in Vietnam. Back home after graduating from college in California, he began playing with various bands in the area. In 1970, Bob joined the band Sweet Pain, who would release a couple of albums and a few singles in the early 70s. Next came Mel Taylor and the Dynamics, who with Bob on board recorded both a studio and a live album in 1973. In the new millennium, Mr. Spalding played with the Minneapolis band the Surf Dawgs, leaving a slew of albums in their wake. And my guest played with the Ventures up until January of this year. Well, welcome, Bob.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you for taking time out.
Thanks for that nice intro.
I've had a few say, "Okay, well,
Yeah.
you said it all."
Yeah.
End of interview. Fastest interview ever.
People are going to say, "Wow, that guy's been around for a long time."
Well, take us back to the beginning. Where were you born?
I was born in San Bernardino, California, and in 1947. And my dad was in the Air Force, so I was an Air Force kid, and so we lived a number of places, including Japan, when I was a very young teenager. And there's a story behind that. That's the reason I brought that up.
Yes. Well, go ahead and talk about that since you mentioned it.
Well, I got an interest in the guitar in 1959 when I heard Elvis's version of Fools Such as I. And I never realized it was Hank Garland doing that guitar work, but that guitar work just kind of drew me in. And I said, that's, I would like to, do something like that. And when my family got to Japan, I, reiterated my interest in the guitar. And so I was able to get one and take a couple of lessons. And fortunately, we had, for dependents over there at that time, that was 1960, 61, we had a good source of recorded music and rock and roll. And ironically, one of those sources brought a couple of like 3 albums of the Ventures over there. And of course, we knew Walk Don't Run because they played that in the teen club all the time.
Yeah.
And that's where I formed my first band, if you can call it a band. But it was 2 guitars and my brother on drums. But we were certainly captivated by the Ventures. And again, ironically enough, in 1962, right before we were supposed to rotate back to the States, a rock and roll show came around, and it was Bobby V, Joanne Campbell, and the Ventures. And so we were able to go and we were able to see, those artists. And it was just Bob Bogle and Don Wilson, playing as the Ventures. And so that was like June of 1962. And they were great. And it's the first time I, saw them in person.
Yeah, that's interesting. You mentioned Walk Don't Run. Probably their most well-known track.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever heard a song the first time you heard it was not by the original artist. It was someone else. My dad, he had this hi-fi system, and he used to play Herb Alpert, the Tijuana Brass, and they did a version of Walk Don't Run
Oh,
on there
absolutely.
with the horns, you know, and I
Yeah.
liked it. I liked it. And but then a few years later, when I heard the original, I was like, oh, okay. Well, this is what it's about. This is what it's about. Yeah.
Well, there's a story behind that. That's a really interesting. I just talked to someone else about that, Herb Albert's version. And the reason he did that is because there were some ties back to the Ventures, and the Ventures included The Lonely Bull on their Telstar album
Okay.
in 62, 63 in that arena. And Mel had played on the first demo of The Lonely Bull for Herb Alpert. So he knew Herb.
Okay.
And what happened is when the Ventures album came out, they were selling very well back then. So if you had a song on one of the Ventures album, you made pretty good money in terms of the mechanical royalties that you got for there. And it really helped them fund A&M Records. And so
Okay.
to
Okay.
reciprocate, Herb did Walk Don't Run their on their album, which was Going Places, I think.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
right. Oh, I mean, I grew up with that, you know, but I just love that. And like you mentioned, The Lonely Bull and
Oh
some of
yeah.
that is just wonderful, you know.
Yeah.
It just takes me back to happier times, right?
Yeah.
Well, well, early on, do you remember hearing music in the household when you were young?
Well, my dad was kind of an aficionado of big band music and swing music. So we were always, not always, but we were exposed to Benny Goodman and a lot of the big band folks, as well as some of the jazzier stuff like George Shearing and other artists like that. And so we kind of had that exposure. um, it was kind of up here, and I was kind of gravitated toward rock and roll, which was, to a large degree, 3 or 4 chords. And
Yeah.
so it was kind of out of my reach till later on in my career. Um, but we were exposed to music. And now, none of my family were a musician or studied music or anything like that. But I think they appreciated music.
They had an appreciation for it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. All right. So I wonder where that gene came from for you. The
Well,
music.
there has been, we've looked in basically our heritage, and there was a concert violinist named Albert Spalding,
Okay.
and he was back east. And so we think that maybe, you know, something came from there or somewhere else, but who knows?
Well, well, I was going to ask you, are you any relation to the baseball company or
If I was, I probably wouldn't have gone into music. I probably would have gone into investment banking or something. No, we're not, as a matter of fact.
Okay, all
Yeah.
right. Okay, all right. Well, what was the very first musical instrument you learned to play?
Well, was the guitar, six
Okay.
string guitar, and I had an Japanese electric 6 string guitar from a company called Taisco, and there's been various resurrections of these old Taisco guitars and Gaiatone guitars and things like that. Um, but that's the first instrument I had, and I had a little amplifier. It
Okay.
was probably maybe had a 10-inch speaker, and but what it didn't have any tremolo
Oh,
effect,
okay.
because what happened during that time, 61's, 62, is you hear instrumental music or you hear rock and roll music, and there was an effect on the guitar. And the one that's probably most prominent is Ghost Riders in the Sky. And if you
Right.
hear that, both the original and the one the Ventures did,
Yeah.
there's this an effect of tremolo. I saved my money and I went down and bought an amp that had tremolo on it. And and it was great. You know, it was great to have, you know, something that was that cool, you know, at that time. When we
Yeah.
moved back to the States, unfortunately, because of the way the components were made, um, the transformer and the amp imploded, and so the amp didn't work anymore.
Oh, it didn't. Oh no.
No, yeah. So so I went for a time without an amp, and then eventually I was able to buy a Fender Bandmaster blonde 212s
Oh,
and use
okay.
that. Yeah.
Oh, you have to get like an adapter or something like that. It works with it. Wow. Well, can you remember the first 45 or album that you bought?
Uh, wow, you know, that's a really good question. And I have to say that I have an older brother, and he played drums in my band. But before that, um, uh, in Japan, and even before we went to Japan, he was older than me, so he was into rock and roll, and he bought all the records. So
Okay.
I didn't have to buy any. All I
It's
had to
good,
do was listen to his.
good to have an older
And then
brother.
he'd get mad at me for listening to his. But I
Right.
have to, you know, that's a really good question. I have to think back about what
Sure.
the, you know,
I
the first 45.
don't want
I,
to put you on the spot there.
I,
You
I don't remember. I don't remember right.
know.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So you leaned on your brother for that
I
influence.
will remember, and I'll send you an email and let you know.
Okay. All right. All right. All right. Well, how about some other bands and musicians that you were getting into, say as a teenager?
Well, when I continued to play when we got back to the States, we rotated back to Austin, Texas.
Yeah.
And my dad retired from the Air Force from Bergstrom, which is now the Austin Airport. Um, I continued to play, and my brother was going to UT, and he met a friend
Okay.
named Lance Turner, and Lance was a singer and guitar player, so he would come over and play, and we'd just mess around and make some tapes, and that got a little bit more serious, and we essentially put a band together. Got another guy and put a band together, and we called ourselves the Nomads.
That's the Nomad.
And I was moving from a sophomore in high school to a junior. And it was a time where being in a rock band in Austin was a pretty good thing if you were good. And we practiced a lot, and we got to be really good. And we were busy all the way through until I went, you know, into the army. So it was, you know, it was good. You know, as a student and a young kid going through high school, I never had to get a job in the grocery store or a gas station or anything like that. I just played music on the weekends, and
Uh-huh.
then sometimes all through the week. And if we were playing, you know, at UT, and if we were playing at a club or something, and so we made really good money. We made so good money that my dad got worried, and he said, "You need to keep track of this because you know you may have to pay taxes on this." I
Right.
never did though, never did.
Well, let me ask you this: at that early age playing, were both of your parents were they pretty encouraging?
No,
Okay.
I'll have to say that my parents tolerated it.
Okay.
Um, my my schoolwork suffered because my orientation was toward music rather than intellectual pursuits, if you will.
Okay.
And so they were okay as long as I kept my grades up and I didn't get in trouble. You know, I didn't get arrested or anything like that, which
Right.
I didn't. And but you know, they were okay, but they were skeptical. Let me put it that way. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
and and of course, all that went away when I went into the military in October of 1966,
Okay.
and of course, that was kind of a hiatus for me in playing because you were full time, in the military, and you were gone.
Right. So that was after high school, right?
It was after high school. Yeah,
Okay. So you
yeah,
were inducted, drafted in the Army, and you served a tour over there.
that's correct.
Any stories you'd like to tell?
Well, the I went into the Army. And I'm not sure if I did that because my dad was in the Air Force,
Uh,
but he didn't, he didn't, uh, he didn't say that was the wrong thing to do.
yeah.
He just patted
Yeah.
me on the back and said, "Okay, well, take care of yourself." But I went in the Army and was trained for radio carrier operations, which was calling in strikes and things like that, and being in the field communications. And so when I got to Vietnam, went to Vietnam in April of latter part of April of 1967, and when I got over there, I worked construction because they were just building up, and there were just not many places for the troops to live. So I worked construction for about 3 or 4 months, and then I worked what I was trained for in a radio site. And there was really not that much going on. There were periodic, battles that occurred, but not anything really big. But when in January, latter part of January of 1968, when the Tet Offensive happened, then everything just kind of,
Oh,
changed. And so I was down south at a base called Long Binh, and then there was a contingent of us that went from Long Binh all the way up to a forward operating base in Phu Bai, and that's when all the activity and stuff was happening. And so I saw a lot of action up there, and yeah, so there's a few stories that are kind of scary,
okay. Well,
but there are some funny things that happened. I did my whole tour, and uh, was strangely enough, it didn't matter what you were trained for. But when we got up north, I was in a rifle company, and we were out on the edge of in the perimeter, and we were there each night, all the 7 days a week. And I finally got transferred back to the secure area where the radio folks equipment was, and finished out my tour there for about a month. And then they're very nice to me. They got transferred. I had to transfer out of another city. I had to transfer out from Da Nang. So they took me down to the airport, for lack of a better term, and base. And what you did, you just cut a hop from um, you cut a hop from there to wherever you're going. And I was going to Da Nang to process out, get my records. And so it was later in the evening, and I got on board a C-130, and there was nobody on board except another Vietnamese family. And so, and there was no seats. So the little
okay.
pastor said, "Just hang on, just hang on." I said, "Fine." He said, "We're going to Da Nang, but we're going to make a quick stop to another base called Dong Ha, which was a little bit further north." And we were already by the DMZ anyway. So we're, and it's not that far. And so the guy, they take off, and we're kind of, running around in this big
Trying
ceiling
to
fan.
stand up, yeah.
And we start the descent into Dong Ha, and I hear these little clicking sounds, and the lift master says, "Come here, look out there." And so you look out there, and you see these little red dots, and those are bullets coming at you.
Oh, okay, scary.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so you hit them, you hear them hit the plane,
Yeah,
ding, ding, ding,
yeah.
and I'm thinking, I've done my whole year, and then I'm going to get shot down
On
on,
the last day.
on
Yeah,
my day before I get to go home. So
right.
yeah, it's kind of a matter of course, and they didn't hit anything vital. We landed, the guy turned the plane around, and the Vietnamese family scampered off, and then we lifted the back and took off again, and the same thing, ding, 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 ding.
Oh man,
But we
that would.
made, yeah,
Oh yeah, that would be my luck too to do that, the same kind of thing. Right,
yeah, we made it
right when
with
you
that.
think you're
So
you're
yeah,
you're out of there, and
Jesus, yeah.
wow, good
So
story.
anyway, so I made it. I got home and met my wife and got married, and
Yeah.
uh,
Well, well, you did graduate college in San Bernardino, and after, what did you do after you graduated?
um, it was oh yeah, it was right after I graduated. I went to work for a radio station in San
Oh,
Bernardino, came came in KMEN, and I was in the ad department, and I got a call. I was only there for like 3 months, and I got a call from Mel Taylor,
oh,
the
all right,
Ventures,
all right,
and Mel
right.
said that, well, he was taking a sabbatical from the Ventures, and so he wasn't with the Ventures, but he had a commitment to do a tour in Japan,
Okay.
and he wanted to know if I'd be interested in coming on board with being part of his band, and I said, sure. And of course, this was after my experience with the music business, and being with Sweet Pain and those kind of things. And it may make more sense.
Yeah,
If,
let's go back to
yeah, if I
that.
told you when I got out of the military
Uh-huh.
and I went back to college, I went and got this opportunity to join this band, Sweet Pain, who was
Okay.
in the middle of recording an album, and they were with a very influential producer, I guess. And so I ended up finishing the album with them, and they got signed to, of all places, Liberty Records. And of
Okay.
course, that's where the Ventures were.
The
And I was
Ventures.
so excited about going. Someone told them,
Uh-huh.
someone told the Ventures that, one of the guys in this band is a real fan. And so they wanted to meet me too. And so
Oh,
we
okay.
met at Liberty, and that's how I kind of
Oh,
met
yeah.
him, got to know him. And that
There's,
was kind of neat.
there
And
was there was that mutual admiration thing going on.
yeah, yeah. And I went to a couple of sessions that they did, and was a couple of rehearsals and some sessions that they did. And I felt like I helped arrange some songs, and but they were nice. They were, really good. And at that time, Jerry McGee was playing lead, and Johnny Durrell was playing keyboards,
Okay.
and Mel was, playing drums. And so um, when Sweet Pain, when our contract went away with Sweet Pain, I went back to school, and then I graduated, and then Mel called me and said that
Uh,
he,
so,
that's,
when was it that this may be going back a little bit? When did you play in Chuck Berry's backup band?
well, we were touring with Sweet Pain, and you always got these opportunities that there was an artist that would come in and of course Chuck Berry was notorious for this. He would not bring any music. He traveled with a Cadillac Coupe de Ville and a
Yeah.
trailer,
Yeah.
and he had his two Showman amps
Yeah.
in the back and his guitars and stuff. So we were playing this show back in a couple of times out in the Long Beach area. I think it was the Long Beach area. And so he needed a band. So we opened, and then myself and the drummer and the bass player, Frank Demme, Marty Foltz, and myself backed up Chuck Berry.
Okay.
And when you backed up Chuck Berry, it was a challenge. Let me put it, because there was no rehearsal,
Yes. Yes,
because
I've heard that.
he expected you to know the songs, and of course,
Right.
but
Yeah.
he had all these physical moves that he would do to say, okay, when I raise my leg and come down like that, that means you stop. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
When I go like this, that means you emphasize a certain chord or something like that. And um, he, I have to say this. I mean, because I know Keith Richards of the Stones backed me up on this. He, unfortunately, he was just a very angry guy, and he just would do anything to screw the band up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I thought that, because I'd seen him before, and I was on the road, and there was another band backing him up, and he did the same thing.
They did the same thing.
Yeah, we'd do something, and it would embarrass the band. It wouldn't embarrass him, but people didn't care. He
Yeah.
sang the song,
Yeah.
his hits, and they were legacy songs, famous.
Well, yeah, I've heard stories too. I heard one where he fired every member of the band throughout the show, so he ended up taking all the money for himself.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I don't
So
I don't remember getting paid for it. I really don't. I mean, but there were always times like that. We backed up, or I did. I know I played bass for the Cajun fiddle player, Doug Kershaw.
oh, Doug Kershaw, yeah.
Yeah, and of course in Sweet Pain, we opened for everybody. I mean,
Yeah.
we opened for all kinds of people. Linda Ronstadt.
I was going to ask you about Linda. Who was her backing band?
The first time we opened for her, this is strange.
Yeah.
Her backing band was what was to become the Eagles,
Yes.
and
Yes.
they were very good. They
Yes.
weren't real happy playing with her,
Okay.
and I find that strange. But they were really loud.
Okay. Oh, were they? Okay.
So she's such a great vocalist that she can overcome any of that stuff. The next time um, we opened for her, it was a different set of folks, and I don't remember. It was probably somebody like Jay Graydon and Keltner or somebody like that. And so, but yeah, and but it was kind of a variety of people that we opened for. The Nitty Gritty Dirt Band,
Oh,
one of the best groups I've ever seen, um, and one of the most strange, eclectic is Norman Greenbaum.
oh, yeah.
The
Spirit in the Sky.
Spirit in the Sky. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, Norman was quite a guy.
yeah. What a
And
character.
then jazz guitar player is Gabor Szabo, um, uh, Dave Mason, Spencer Davis Group. If I sit down and think about it, I'll probably come up with some more.
Well, what was Dolphin Market? What was that?
We in Sweet Pain, part of our repertoire was, which was popular at the time, was kind of a jam band type thing, and you would start off with a theme, and then the band would play on that theme for a couple of verses, and then someone would go off on a solo.
Okay.
He would end his solo on a certain passage, and another person would pick up on that passage and go on and do another solo, who would end up doing the same thing and the same thing and the same thing. We had a song called Diego, and Diego was that kind of song. It actually went on for. We actually did a recording of it in the studio, and it was 20 minutes long.
Wow. Okay.
And yeah, and um, and we were still with United. Well, Liberty became United Artists. They were bought out by United Artists, and so United Artists. Someone there got an idea to use one of their subsidiaries and say, why don't we do a cut down version of Diego, and we'll use another name for the group, Dolphin Market. And Dolphin Market was actually a grocery store in Seal Beach.
Oh, all right.
And yeah, that's how that
Okay,
came
that
about.
was a grocery store. Okay.
Yeah, so we went in the studio and did kind of um, I have to say, it was kind of a Ventures version of, Diego, the long version. It was almost like, here's Diego by Sweet Pain, his 20-minute jam
Yeah,
band.
yeah. I was gonna
And
say,
then here's Diego, a 2.5-minute how-to version of the song.
yeah,
But they put that out, and
yeah.
it's become it, in the annals of instrumental music, it's become somewhat of an oddity, I guess. So yeah.
Well, you mentioned briefly earlier about meeting Mel Taylor. Go ahead and pick up that story.
Well, Mel called and asked if I wanted to be part of the Dynamics band that he was taking over to Japan, and I said sure. And we got together and practiced, and I have to say that the Dynamics were kind of like um, all the people from the second iteration of the Ventures, because Jerry McGee played lead, Johnny Durrell played keyboards, I played rhythm, Mel played drums, and that was the Dynamics. And well, it was Mel Taylor in the Dynamics, and so I got my first experiences with playing essentially with the Ventures, if you
Yeah,
will.
yeah.
And we did an album in the studio with them. Our bass player played on one side, and the other side was played by Mel's brother, Larry Taylor,
Okay.
who's famous for Canned Heat and other bands.
Right.
So we did that, and then we toured Japan for about a month and a half. And I'd never been on a tour like that, because you fly, and I guess at that time, that was 1973,
Yeah.
and it was kind of like business class. The seats were nice, and where I sat on the other side was the fifth dimension. And
Oh, were they?
yeah, yeah. And I remember one of their kids coming over, and I had very long hair and mustache, and the kid said, "Are you a scientist?" I play with the Dynamics over here. He runs back over and tells one of his dad, there's the Dynamics over there. Who knows? Who knows Dynamics? So anyway, so you fly over, and then we did a press conference in Japan when we got there, and it was basically because you didn't have to do anything. All you had to do was show up, and you stay in these nice hotels, and you show up and play, and there's an equipment guy that tunes your guitar and gets everything set up. So it was a really, really nice tour. And while we were there, we did live album. And that's a lot of people have enjoyed that too. So,
Yeah.
but I think I'm really proud of those albums that we did. So,
Yeah. Well, try to explain the fascination that Japan and Japanese people have for the ventures. The-
well, yeah, you know what happened is that, and it's ironic that I was there, but when they first made their first trip in 1962 over there, they really captured an entire generation of young men who got fascinated by the electric guitar, and they um, they thought the Ventures, they were just captivated by this instrumental music and the Ventures, and they started following them. And Liberty increased their shipment of guitar, increased their presence in Japan, largely to market, you know, the Venture's success over there. And
Wow.
they didn't come back until 1964 or 65, one of those. Yeah, I was, you know, 2 or 3 years after that. And they were met like the Beatles over there. And I think part of their success was the fact that, first of all, there was no barriers in terms of language.
Right.
Secondly, is that the Ventures music was always played um, with perfection. And secondly, is the majority of it was accessible to
Mhm.
people, to guitar players. And of course, they did that the same thing in the States too. And so when you listen to the Ventures music, it was like, oh yeah, well, I can do that. And not only that, is that, you know, I can put a band together now, and I can get, you know, another guy, and then we could play guitars, and another guy play bass, and a drummer, and we could sit down and play this music, and we don't have to sing.
Right. Right.
I think that was
Yeah.
quite, you know,
I think you hit on it with there was no barrier, language
yeah,
barrier. You said,
yeah, yeah.
but we had you get the ventures. UK had the Shadows,
Yeah.
you know, and so many of these interviews I talked to the UK musicians, they mention, Hank Marvin and the Shadows
hmm
as being very influential too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it was, but I think a little later on, there were Japanese bands that cropped up too, playing that same kind of music, same style, that the instrumental, you know.
Yeah, there are still um, venture cover bands in Japan, and
Yeah.
they have like festivals, you know, that are these cover bands play Ventures music, and they have all these, and so you have like the Osaka Ventures and the Kyoto Ventures,
Yeah.
and you know, all these other, and almost each city has a Ventures band, if you will.
Yeah.
So yeah, it seemed to just permeate through the culture over there. So much so that we got an award in, uh, I don't know, must have been about 10, 15 years ago.
2010,
Yeah,
2000.
you know, from the emperor for the
Right.
influence onto the Japanese culture of the Ventures music.
Right.
So that was,
The Order of the Rising Sun.
yes, that was pretty
I mean, that's
good.
a high award, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wonder how many other bands can boast that honor, you know? Wow.
There's only a couple of artists besides the Ventures that have gotten that award,
Yeah.
and I don't remember who, but they were vocalists. You
Okay.
know, yeah, not
You
instrument.
must have been the only instrumental band to do that. That's wow.
Yes, yeah.
That's quite an award, like you said. Wow.
Oh,
Uh,
absolutely. Yeah.
absolutely. Well, in 1980, Mel rejoined the Ventures,
Mhm.
and you were asked to play additional guitar on some of the recordings. How long before you became like a permanent fixture?
Well, I became um, I know Mel, and was living in Austin at the time, Um, and let me just explain some economic situations that happened after Mel Taylor and the Ventures.
Oh, sure.
I mean, Mel Taylor and the Dynamics came back was the exact time that the first oil embargo hit. And
Right.
so when that happened, the record companies basically shut down
Yeah. Yeah.
because vinyl was a product of petroleum.
Petroleum. They couldn't make them. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they couldn't make it. And the only thing they were doing was doing greatest hits album with
Yeah.
what limited resources they have. So they weren't signing anybody. No one was doing anything. So my wife and I and kids, I had two kids at that time. We moved back to Texas, and I went back, and I would fortunately, my brother didn't play drums professionally because he went to work for IBM. And
Oh.
fortunately, he did because he moved back in '74. He got me a job at IBM. And so I worked for IBM for a while. And then in 1980, when Mel went back to 7980, when Mel went back with the guys, they were going out on the road again. And they came through Austin. And of course, they stopped by to see me. And we kind of reconnected at that point. Um, and they got up on their east east coast leg of their tour, and Noki was not doing well. Noki Edwards, their lead guitar player and original guy from the Ventures, and he actually went in the hospital, and I think it was Syracuse, and they were due to go back to New York the next day. So I got a call at 2 o'clock in the morning and said, "Hey, do you think you could get on a plane and go to New York and and uh, and play lead? And we've got got these shows coming up, so and we got like 2 days, and we're leaving for New York tomorrow. So if you want to do that, let me know, and then we'll make arrangements." So I said, "Yeah, okay." So so
Oh.
I went into IBM and got a leave of absence,
Okay.
and they said, "Well, fill out this form," and I filled out the form, and they said, "Okay, well, we'll let you know in a week." And I said, "Okay, well, just let me know. I'm gone." So anyway, so I went out and I flew to New York, and I met the guys in Hoboken, New Jersey at the Holiday Inn, and we practiced the entire night. I got there probably about 9 o'clock, and then we had a couple of beers, and then we practiced in the hotel, my hotel room, and rehearsed and just kind of went over the set and the music. And uh, Bob Bogle worked with me first, and then he would take a break. I mean, it was like 4 in the morning, and he would take a break. Don would come in, and then he would practice, play practice with me. But when Don came in, it was more like, well, let's have a couple of drinks, and then we can. But anyway, so we were at least somewhat. Uh, uh, I was oriented toward their sets for
Okay.
the next night, which was in New York. And so essentially what happened is I completed their East Coast tour. And along that tour was the July 4th Spirit of America show the Ventures did with the Beach Boys.
Oh,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I did that show. And then we went back to New York and did all the, big time clubs again.
How
And
was that with the Beach Boys? How was that show?
well, it behind the scenes of, major acts like that is always, it's always interesting, if you will. Probably the most dysfunctional group of people I've ever seen. It was a time when Brian's, was not doing well at all. Um, for every Beach Boy that was on stage, and I have to say, the worst one was Dennis Wilson,
Yeah.
who tried to play drums.
Yeah.
The best one was God, and he wasn't an original. He was, but he played uh, keyboards. He could play keyboards and bass, um, he, and he was a hit songwriter too. And I can't. Anyway, he was a nice guy. He was very nice. Um, and Carl wasn't there because
Okay.
Carl was sick, and so Al Jardine was there. But anyway, they wouldn't talk to anybody. I mean, the one guy did, but the rest of them were. And what happened during the show is that for every Beach Boy that was on, original Beach Boy that was on the stage, there was a replacement. So
Oh,
Dennis got so drunk he falls off his stool, and the guy just comes in and sits in and plays with him. Brian just abruptly gets off the piano and just walks off stage. And then
really?
the guy comes
Really?
in. It's like the Chuck Berry thing.
Okay.
The people are so enamored with the music and the songs and stuff like that that they don't care. The other thing is that there were so many people there. I think it was 300,000 or something like that. You
Huge crowd.
when we were playing, and I got photos, and I can send you some photos if you're
Oh,
interested.
oh, sure.
Um, and you just look out, and maybe within 20 feet you can see people, and
Uh-huh.
then after 20 feet, it's just like this sea of hair that's moving out there. It, it was quite an experience. Yeah, quite an experience.
Uh,
Of course, the other aspect of that tour um, was it was in the early 80s, and when we played these clubs in New York City, um, and more oriented in New York City, is that's when the mosh pits started. So,
oh, right.
and the Ventures music is so energetic and so influenced the punk generation that we would have these mosh pits out there. We were playing, Waylon or some other song, or and then people would sneak up on stage and jump out into the
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
And actually, our equipment manager got hurt
Oh,
and hurt his ankle because he was there poised at the stage to try to capture these guys before
yeah.
it went off. So, yeah, it was yeah,
Oh, wow.
it
So,
was quite a thing. So.
yeah, so
Uh,
you guys were first one of the first bands to. I mean, the mosh pitters can owe
uh,
you a big due to that, and starting that movement, that
yeah,
trend.
it was
And
amazing. Uh,
wow.
so then after that, I was just like accepted into the family, type thing. And so the next thing that I did is right after that, they went on the road again, but Don didn't go.
Okay.
Don stayed home. And he contacted me and he said, "Look, I got to do this record because the Japanese needed this recording done." He said, "Can you come in and can you help out?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." So we went in and did a theme to a TV show called St. Louis Memories.
Okay.
And then the flip side was a really interesting instrumental. And I never really knew exactly what the name of it was. I just played it. But what happened in that session was I was just supposed to play bass. And they had another guy, guitar player, who was a reader, and he was going to play lead. And so we rehearsed it once at Don's house, and then we went in the studio and I played. Oh, and Joe Barilli played drums, who was actually a replacement drummer when Mel was gone.
Oh, okay.
Joey's a great guy, funny guy, and great drummer too. And so it was he and I and this Dale Casher, who was a guitar player for Lawrence Welk,
Oh,
and
okay. You
and
shivered.
there was a keyboard player, and
Yeah.
I don't know what happened to him, but
Yeah.
they decided he didn't need to be there. Um, and Don was not happy with what Dell was playing, and so he said, "Can you play that?" And so anyway, I ended up playing bass, rhythm, and lead on
Oh,
those sessions,
okay.
and it was interesting because I think one of the things that um, kind of got me into the family was the fact that I could play in the spirit of the Ventures.
Yeah.
I knew how Noki played, I knew how Bob played, and so I try to play like that, so it sounded like the Ventures. And so we did those sides, and then the record came out, and the one side was more Noki-ish, and the record came out, and the reviews were like St. Louis Memories. Um, is really good. We've never heard Noki at his best. Yeah,
Uh,
Noki is at his best on this record. And the flip side has, like Bob Bogle playing like he used to. And I'm like, oh, I was either in trouble then, or I was
you, you,
either that, or I was,
you, you
completely
fooled,
immersed in.
you fooled them. Yeah. You pulled the
Yeah,
wool over their eyes there.
yeah. So,
Well, those
so
are good compliments anyway.
it was
Yeah.
very much so.
Yeah.
And so Bob seeing a good thing, Bob Bogle, you know, he wanted me to be involved with whatever recordings they were doing.
Yeah.
And he was pretty smart, not pretty smart. He was a very intelligent man. And so when I started playing with them, then they would put my name on the credits,
Yeah.
and they would just say Bob Spalding added guitar or something. But I would go in almost a utility person, and I would do whatever they needed, be it rhythm, lead parts, or bass or whatever. And that's how someone, and I think it was in the UK, came up with, wow, this is like Bob Spalding is the fifth venture, and that's how that name came up like that. And so we kind of stuck with that to do my for my solo albums.
Right. Right. Okay.
The, but in the 80s, and the 90s, I would do two things. I would go out on the road when someone didn't want to or someone couldn't, uh,
Mhm.
and play, and I would do the recordings, whatever recordings they had coming up. And so those are the two things that would that I did, end up doing consistently with them. And then
Oh,
so I just kind of became a default member, if you will.
yeah.
And then Bob eventually, was diagnosed with cancer, and so he went ahead and continued to play and record, and he decided that it wasn't fair to his wife at the time, and so he decided, no, I don't want to do this. I shouldn't do this. And so he asked me, can you just replace me? And if you can do that, that'd be great. And which I did. And then I became part of the group, um, from a more visible standpoint, I guess.
Right. When
Yeah.
was it when was it that Bob passed away?
Yeah. Christmas of 2004. Yeah.
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 All right. Yeah. Were there any other lineup changes over the years when you were with the band?
Well, there were several people that went out performing with them during the 80s, um, and for a number of reasons. One is I didn't want to do it. and
Yeah.
and financially I couldn't do it. And I had, plus I had, I had two kids, and I was putting them through school, and my daughter and my son, and so I was fortunate that they just allowed me to do the things that were more important to them. They
Right.
could get someone to go out on the road with them, and so there were various people. One of which was Paul Warren, and he's a accomplished guitar player. Has played with many people. He went out with them for a while, and it was almost like on a tour basis. So
Okay.
Paul went out on this tour, and then another guy went out, another bass player went out, and for a while, Bob Bogle had a company that built homes up in the Northwest. So he wasn't, going out with the group, and then so various people, and then it kind of congealed again when they started and they had the opportunity to go back to Japan.
Okay.
And so when they went back to Japan, Noki quit, Noki came back, Noki quit. Jay got Jerry to go out a couple of times, and then so yeah, there were numerous people that were in and out of like the touring band, if you will.
Okay. Yeah, and
Yeah.
you mentioned, we talked about the Order of the Rising Sun, and then talking about Bob Bogle. You were in a couple of separate ceremonies accepting inductions for Bob.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And it was very gracious of Bob, and of course we'd known each other for quite a while by then, and he didn't want to go, and he didn't feel like it, and so so he asked me to accept for him, and I said, yeah, I'd be honored to. Yeah, yeah. And I don't know if you've seen the video or the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame video. It's just a good one to watch. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I'll check that out. And then the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, for
Oh yeah, yeah.
that's
And then
where,
yeah.
that's
Mhm.
where Bob was, I guess, originally from, right? Oklahoma.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he and Noki were from Oklahoma. Yeah,
Okay, okay,
yeah.
okay. All right. Well, when did you start playing with the Surf Dawgs? When did that start?
Okay, that was probably about excuse me. That was
Bless you.
probably that was probably about 10 or 15 years ago. And
Here's you some
oh,
water.
thank you. Thank you very much. And I heard one of their CDs, and somehow I got in touch with Zippy, and I applauded them for their creativity, and I said, you know, you guys sound better than the Ventures. And I said, you really, this is amazing work. And I was surprised that they weren't more popular than, but they were just kind of just perform locally for the most part around St. Paul,
Okay.
and they so we kept in touch, and then they were recording at the time, and he asked me if I wanted to record with them, and of course at the time the technology was uh, gave us the ability for them to record their tracks in Minnesota, send me a dub of the tracks, and I'll put my parts on here in my studio. And then I send my parts back to them, and then they put it all together, and that's how they came about. So I think it was three or four albums, I guess, that I've been on with them. Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
yeah.
Did you ever play live with them, with the
I
band?
did. Yeah. One time I flew up. No, twice. Twice. I flew up and did a club with them. and it was the release of one of their albums, and that was fun. That was good. And because Zippy and I had worked out parts. So,
Okay.
when you play Ventures music and you have another guitar player that also knows his music, it's great when you work out parts and do like harmony of Lullaby the Leaves and those kind of things. Um, but I did that, and then on another album release, I went up and I played with Tony Andreessen of the Trashmen.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Great guy, and played with him. And then I played with the Surf Dawgs, and then I played my stuff. And so it was the Surf Dawgs, Bob Spalding, and then Tony Andreessen, and so that was a fun night. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Did y'all go down well with the audience?
Yes,
Like,
absolutely.
okay. Yeah, I think that kind of music, instrumental music, is going to last forever. I think it's just like you said,
It's one of the evergreen things, and
yeah.
I don't play. Of course, I haven't played a lot this year because retirement from the Ventures, but I have done a couple of local things, and I'm actually playing this Tuesday uh,
Oh,
in
okay.
Austin at a small cafe called Evangeline's, and I'm playing with my good friend, a guy named Rhett Ruiz, and,
Uh-huh.
and he plays bass, and then I play guitar, and we've been doing like a duo, and we play classical instrumental music. Not classical, the classic
The
instrument.
classic instrumental
Yeah.
for that. All right. Well, uh, the 2022 documentary, Walk, Don't Run, the story of the Ventures. How was it being involved with that?
That was a very big effort for Stacy, who was Don's daughter, and she worked really hard on developing that and doing the interviews and doing all that, and I helped her as much as I could, and actually had played some of the source music in the back for them, and um, uh, at the time, and which is still the case, it is so expensive to license well-known music.
Yeah.
So getting a license, mechanical license for something like Walk Don't Run, it's just amazing. It's amazing how much it costs. And when you look at a group like the Ventures, who have so much music out there, it becomes a astronomical cost to developing a documentary. So we did some things that were kind of gave the music there, not only me, but some other musicians also, that gave the music background, if you will, more of a characteristic of Ventures music. And But yeah, she had to work really hard. She did not have any support from the people that ran or managed the Ventures. She had support from her dad, Don Wilson, and but she was really had a hard time with people that ran the company, Taylor Wilson and Associates, and but she maintained and got it out, and I applaud her for doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. Was anybody else involved in that? Any of the other members?
No, I
No.
think everyone by that time had passed on.
Okay.
Mel passed in '96,
Okay.
and then Bob passed in 2009, and Don was still, and then Noki passed in later, and then but no one else was involved except me, you know,
Okay.
and I just tried to do as much as I can to help her in trying to get, give her an understanding of getting sync rights and
Yeah.
how to do that and all of those kind of a business thing, and then recording some things that were venture-esque, if you will, for the background.
Right. I need to watch. I haven't watched that. I need to check that out. And
Okay.
yeah, myself and see. But that was, yeah, it was only a couple of years ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so many songs over the years, like you mentioned. What are some of your favorites and favorites to play? Yeah.
Uh, Walk Don't Run is such a enduring song. Um, and each version of that, if you listen to Johnny Smith's original version, which was kind of jazzy,
Yeah.
and then Chet Atkins' version, which was kind of classical, and of
Yeah.
course then the Ventures version, which was, you know, certainly rock oriented, but there's a magic to it, and there's a magic to Walk Don't Run, um, that is that makes it unique. And
Yeah.
uh, we were we were doing a show with Les Paul in 2009, I think, or 2008. It was his birthday show, and as a part of that, the Ventures, myself, Noki, Leon, and Don, uh, did a Q&A at Carnegie Mellon.
Okay.
And one of the things I wanted to do, is that we had some instruments that we could, you know, play. And we sat on stools. And one of the things that I thought would be a good idea was to decompose Walk Don't Run and tell, you know, show people why this is, you know, why this has magic to it. And so it was interesting because I was able to do that. The guys allowed me to do that. And so from this big auditorium, you know, we decomposed, you know, and you know, so it was really neat. And I think, you know, when you start to do that, you start to see the magic behind how all this comes together.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
and it was really neat. And the funny part, not the funny part, but we had a chance to talk with Les Paul.
Mhm.
Leon and I did
Oh,
after we went on, and because he was coming on after us for a
yeah.
Q&A. And you know, he said, you know, he said, Johnny Smith, the guy who wrote the song, he wanted me to do that. And I said, I can't do that, you know. And he said, you got such a great job on it. I'm not doing it. Very complimentary, very
Yeah.
complimentary.
Oh, it would have been. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, Les Paul. What a
yeah,
great guitarist. Yeah.
yeah,
Les and Mary Ford. Yeah. Yeah. When they all those recordings together.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Again, very influential too. Yeah. Well, you also released a few solo albums yourself.
Yes.
Yeah. Any in particular that's I don't
Well,
want
I
to say
have.
your favorite, but some that are mean more to you than others. Yeah.
Well, I have two.
Uh,
I have the Fifth Venture album, and which is kind of got a story behind it. And then I have the Transitions album.
right. Transition.
And the Transitions album, I believe, is still available. The Fifth Venture album, uh, with Blue Dawn on it, I think is completely sold out. I've got a couple of copies here, but I'm thinking about reissuing it. But the Fifth Venture album, I cut in my home in 1980s, um, and it essentially consists of demos that I had done for the guys.
Oh, okay.
Because I had, you know, kind of a makeshift recording studio, and I had an 8-track recorder, and I had a mixer, and they would start a project, and then I would start to do demos about, well, let's do this, or this is, you know, a thing. And essentially that's what that um, album is made up of, is those demos that I submitted to them. I cleaned them up, and then we put them in a record. And actually, the first one was a cassette tape. And
Oh,
yeah, and it's called "The World Is a Curious Place," and that went on to being a CD that was marketed in the UK, and then the Japanese picked up on it, and they marketed it, and then I put out a US version of it. And then Transitions was a little bit more of me um, uh, doing other things other than, straight ventures type things. Now
Oh,
I'm working on, and I'm glad you asked because I'm working on another solo album right now. It's one of the things I'm
oh,
doing,
oh,
and
great. Great.
yeah, and I hope it's got the concept for the new album is recording in the venturesque style, if that's a word, um, of songs that they never did, but they should have done.
They should have done.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
And and of course it was tough to do all the songs that, you know, you think maybe they should have done, but and having an inside, to some degree, inside track on their stories about the starting up in the old days and all that kind of stuff. You run across things that one of the songs that they used to play as a duo was Moonlight in Vermont. And,
oh, okay.
and
Right.
they could take these classic songs and they could, if you listen to the first album, they could take these classic songs and put them in this venture style of music. And, it was just really good. So my thought was to say, okay, well, I wonder what other songs, would have sounded good that they would have done during the early 60s or mid 60s.
Right. Right. Oh, that will be fascinating. Yeah. Yeah. So you've already started work on that, or is that
Yes, yeah, yeah,
okay? All right. All
yeah,
right. Well, that's something to look forward to for the
yeah.
fans and people to check back at your website.
Yeah,
And
and I should have we're gonna start recording here pretty soon, but I'm gonna have some guests on it playing what help with me.
okay.
Um, my son and Luke Griffin and Rhett Ruiz and then yeah, so this is different people come up.
Oh, I was going to ask you real quickly about the guitars behind you.
Mhm.
Any stories there, or what's the oldest guitar that you have?
The oldest is I'm not sure if I can. Okay, if we go this way, you see
Uh,
the red guitar. Uh,
yes,
Let me see if I can.
it's like the second one.
Yeah, and it's an Epiphone,
Okay. Oh, okay.
and it's
Okay.
the oldest.
Okay.
It's probably the most valuable.
Oh,
It's kind of a jazz type guitar. And then let's see. Oh, okay. The other one is this is a original Mosrite.
oh, right there. Okay.
Here. It's a 1965, and it's original. It's got ventures. If I can
Yeah.
put that, see if I can put that.
Oh, oh, there we go. There's even more. Yeah.
Okay. And then next to it is an Aria guitar, which is my signature guitar when I was playing in Japan,
Okay.
and it was designed for me. And then there is a
There we
Hallmark
go.
bass, which is kind of a Mosrite copy style bass. And then there's um,
Oh, wow. There's a lot more.
then there's
Several more.
the this one here is my Hallmark signature model, which
Okay.
they made for Bob Shade of Hallmark made for me.
Oh, okay.
And this is a Dan Electro 12 string.
And that
Okay.
that very last one has kind of the shape of the Gibson a
Mm-hmm.
little bit. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you a
Wow.
player?
No,
Are you?
I'm not. No,
Oh,
I'm
okay.
not. No, I'm not. Well, that's fascinating. Do you still play all of them? Do you still use all your guitars?
I try. I try
Okay.
to. I've already sold when I retired in January. I took stock of all the guitars I had, and I had like I don't know 30, and so um, so
Wow.
I've sold 5,
Mhm.
and so I'll be selling some more here pretty soon.
Okay. Wow.
Not those.
Yeah, okay. I was going to say, don't sell them all. No.
Yeah. I would like to say one more thing, if I may. There
Yeah,
were
sure.
6 projects I wanted to do once I retired from the
Sure.
ventures.
Sure.
And one was another solo album about the concept that we just talked about. But the other one, other project, which I'm also working on, excuse me, is developing a podcast for the music of the ventures,
Oh,
which
okay.
I think is probably the most interesting, is talking about the music of the ventures and how it evolved, how it got developed, how it got recorded, and not so much about the politics of the guys or business aspect, but the music.
The music itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's another thing that I'm hoping to have the first session, the first episode by end of January.
Oh, well, that will be nice. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And of course, we'll keep in touch so I
Yeah.
can let you know when that, and I'd appreciate your
Right.
opinion on it too.
Be
So
sure.
I've enjoyed our talk, and if you have any questions, just email me and I'll be
Okay.
happy to answer what I can.
Okay, I will. And let's try and keep in touch. And I will send you, like I said before we started, a copy of this
Okay.
in a week or so, probably. And then you can post it, send it to whoever you like. And I always love to, hear the responses and the comments. And
Okay.
that way you know that you're doing something right. Well, again, thank you, Bob, and
Thank you, sir.
we'll be in touch. And I've enjoyed it.
Okay. Same here.